There is a photograph taken in Paris last October that most people saw and moved on from almost instantly. It is warm, it is smiling, it is two women exchanging kisses on both cheeks beneath the lights of a fashion show. Meghan, the Duchess of Sussex, in a pristine all-white ensemble, and Anna Wintour, the most powerful gatekeeper in the fashion world, leaning in close, saying something that made Meghan light up. "Beautiful, Cherie, you look amazing." The moment went viral. People took it as a sign that whatever tension had existed between these two women was finally behind them, that the door, which so many had whispered was closed, was quietly swinging open again. But here is the question that nobody asked at the time, and the one we are going to spend the next 25 minutes examining carefully. What does it actually mean when someone tells you that you look amazing and then does not invite you to the most important room in fashion? Before we go any further, if you have found this channel and this kind of honest, carefully researched storytelling resonates with you, please do consider subscribing. We never sensationalize and we never guess. What we do is take the stories that are moving too fast for most people to examine properly, and we slow them down. There is a great deal in this story that deserves to be slowed down. So, let us begin at the beginning. Not in Paris, not at the Met Gala steps, but in the place where this story has its roots, in the complicated, layered, and genuinely fascinating relationship between Meghan Markle and the world of high fashion. When Meghan stepped into the royal family in 2017, she arrived already fluent in the language of style. She had spent years on the set of Suits, she understood cameras, she understood how clothing communicated power, and she was clearly somebody who thought carefully about the image she projected. The fashion world noticed. Designers wanted to dress her, editors wanted to photograph her, and for a time it seemed as though a genuine partnership between this new modern duchess and the global fashion establishment was not only possible but inevitable. The British Vogue issue of August 2019 felt like that partnership made real. Meghan took on the role of guest editor and spent 7 months working alongside then editor-in-chief Edward Enninful on what she called Forces for Change, an issue celebrating women who were shaping the world. It sold out in 10 days. It became, at that point, the fastest-selling edition in British Vogue's entire history. By any reasonable measure, it was a triumph. And this is where the story begins to turn, quietly and in ways that were not visible on the surface. Because according to reporting by Page 6 at the time, the collaboration was not without friction. Sources suggested that Meghan had submitted a list of 6 conditions for any planned coverage. She reportedly wanted control over the photographer, the writer, the final edit, the photographs, the cover lines, and she wanted it to be a global issue, meaning both the American and British editions simultaneously. As anyone familiar with how major magazines operate will understand, those cover spots had already been allocated. The American Vogue cover that September belonged to Serena Williams, a close friend of Meghan's. The British edition had its own plans. There was simply no way to accommodate what was being asked. And so, quietly, behind closed doors, a question began to form in the minds of the fashion world's power brokers. Was Meghan Markle somebody who was genuinely interested in the work, or somebody who was primarily interested in the platform? Now, it is worth being fair here. Those conditions, if accurate, may well reflect the instincts of someone who had been burned by the press, who had watched her image be twisted and weaponized, and who understandably wanted some degree of control over how she was presented. That is not irrational. That is not monstrous. That is someone who had been living through a particular kind of sustained public scrutiny that very few human beings have ever experienced. But in the world of fashion, a world that runs on relationships, on reciprocity, on the unspoken understanding that you give the editor their vision and trust them, those messages in that world tend to linger. Anna Wintour had watched all of this from across the Atlantic. It is worth understanding who Anna Wintour is in this context, because her role in this story is central. She is not simply the editor of American Vogue. She has been, for more than 30 decades, the chief architect of the Met Gala, the annual fundraising event for the Metropolitan Museum of Art's Costume Institute, that has become, by any measure, the most exclusive fashion event in the world. She decides who attends, she approves what they wear, she manages the seating. The guest list for the Met Gala is, in effect, Anna Wintour's personal statement about who matters in the cultural landscape of a given year. And Meghan Markle, despite her global profile, has never once been on that list. That detail matters more than it might first appear, because it is not merely an oversight. The Met Gala guest list is one of the most carefully curated documents in entertainment. No one slips through accidentally. No one is forgotten. The omission of Meghan's name year after year is not an absence. It is a decision. Sources who have spoken to various outlets over recent months have suggested that Anna Wintour is deeply loyal to the British royal family. She was made a Dame Commander of the Order of the British Empire. She is understood to be personally close to King Charles. She attended the royal wedding in 2018 and was photographed doing so with the unmistakable expression of someone who was happy to be there. And it has been reported by several outlets that she was deeply unimpressed with the manner in which Harry and Meghan chose to exit the royal family. Not the exit itself, perhaps, but the way it was executed. The Oprah interview, the Netflix documentary, the book. An insider quoted in reporting on this subject put it plainly. Anna Wintour is said to believe that Harry and Meghan have a habit of making everything about themselves. Whether or not that is a fair characterization, it appears to be a sincere one, and it has had consequences. Now here is the part that most people missed. The moment in Paris last October, the warm embrace, the air kisses, the compliments about the white ensemble, happened in the full knowledge of all this history. Meghan had made the trip to Paris Fashion Week alone. It was, reporters noted, her first time setting foot in Europe in 3 years. Prince Harry was not with her. She attended the Balenciaga Spring-Summer 2026 show, and she was, by all accounts, composed, elegant, and charming throughout. And when she encountered Anna Wintour, sources close to the Duchess suggested she was actively trying to rebuild the relationship, that this was not accidental, that the Paris trip, at least in part, was about putting herself in a room where she might have a genuine, warm, human moment with the woman who holds the keys to the most important door in fashion. By some accounts, it worked. In the short term, the video went viral, as we have discussed. People declared the feud over. Meghan herself, through those close to her, let it be understood that she felt the Paris exchange had been genuinely positive, that whatever bad blood had existed felt in that moment like water under the bridge. But feeling that a door is open and a door being open are, as it turns out, very different things. The 2026 Met Gala, taking place this year under the theme Costume Art, with a dress code of Fashion is Art, has a co-chair lineup that reads like a cultural moment in itself. Beyoncé, Nicole Kidman, Venus Williams, Anna Wintour. 4 women at the absolute apex of their respective fields. And then, as lead sponsors and honorary co-chairs, Jeff Bezos and his wife, Lauren Sanchez Bezos, the former journalist and television presenter whose marriage to the world's wealthiest man last June in Venice was described, not inaccurately, as the social event of the year. Meghan Markle's name does not appear anywhere on the guest list. Reports from sources close to the Sussex camp have described her as stunned when the invitations were distributed and hers did not arrive. She had, according to those accounts, believed the Paris moment had changed things. She had believed a corner had been turned. And yet, what nobody fully appreciated at the time was how the introduction of Lauren Sanchez into the story would change its dynamics entirely. Because Lauren Sanchez Bezos is not simply a co-sponsor of an event. She is, this year, effectively its principal patron. It has been reported that it was Lauren's idea to underwrite the gala. One Hollywood source quoted in coverage of the event put it with characteristic bluntness. This ball was bought. It might be Jeff's money, but it was Lauren's vision and Lauren's connections and Lauren's energy that brought the Bezos name to the steps of the Metropolitan Museum of Art. And Lauren Sanchez and Meghan Markle, it turns out, have their own history. To understand that history, we have to go back even further than Paris. We have to go back to the period before the Bezos wedding in Venice, an event that became, in its own way, one of the most significant social gathering points of 2025. The Venice wedding brought together a remarkable cross-section of power, wealth, and celebrity. The Kardashians were there, Leonardo DiCaprio, Oprah Winfrey, Orlando Bloom, Sydney Sweeney, Tom Brady. It was, in the fullest sense of the phrase, a who's who of exactly the kind of cultural elite that Meghan and Harry have, since leaving the royal family, been working to position themselves within. Harry and Meghan were not invited. According to reporting from Radar Online, sources close to Meghan described her as devastated by the omission. Not simply hurt, but genuinely stunned, because she considered herself and Prince Harry to be more recognizable and more culturally significant than some of the guests who did attend. That is a difficult thing to read, and it is important that we hold it carefully rather than use it as a punchline, because there is something genuinely painful in that description. It speaks to someone whose sense of where they stand has become, perhaps, disconnected from how others in that world actually perceive them. But what made the snub particularly pointed, according to multiple reports, was the suggestion that the damage to the Bezos-Sanchez relationship had not been done by them, it had been done by Meghan. Sources told Radar Online that in the months before the wedding, Lauren Sanchez had in fact reached out to Meghan. She had extended invitations, she had made overtures of friendship, and Meghan had reportedly declined those invitations, not once, but on multiple occasions. The reason given, according to sources, was that Meghan did not want to be seen in Lauren's company, that she considered her, and I am being careful with this language because these are reported quotes and not verified fact, at not the level she aspired to associate with publicly. If that is an accurate account of what happened, it is one of the more human and recognizable stories in this entire saga. Because what it describes is someone making a social calculation, deciding that being photographed alongside a particular person might diminish their own standing, only to discover, too late, that the person they had looked down on had quietly become one of the most powerful social architects in Hollywood. The world had moved, and Meghan, according to those close to the situation, had not moved with it. Now let us pause here and be honest with ourselves, because this audience deserves honesty. We are dealing throughout this story with anonymous sources, with insider accounts from people who have chosen not to be named, with the language of reported claims rather than confirmed fact. Some of what has been reported about Meghan's feelings, motivations, and private assessments of other people may be accurate. Some of it may be distorted. Some of it may have been planted by people with their own agendas. What we can say with confidence is this: the facts on the surface are not in dispute. Meghan was not invited to the 2026 Met Gala. Lauren Sanchez is this year one of its most central figures. Anna Wintour remains in charge of the guest list, and Harry and Meghan were not invited to the Bezos-Sanchez wedding. Those are not rumors. Those are events that either happened or did not, and by all accounts, they happened. The why, the motivations, the feelings, the private assessments, that is where we must be careful. And that care is not weakness. It is the only honest way to tell this story. Let us return to Anna Wintour for a moment, because her position in all of this is genuinely complex. On the one hand, there is a clear pattern. Meghan Markle has never attended the Met Gala, has never been given an American Vogue cover, and was not invited, despite a high-profile and apparently warm public encounter with Wintour just months before the event. On the other hand, Wintour is also on record praising the Bezos involvement in the gala. She publicly welcomed their sponsorship. She works within a world where money and relationships intersect constantly, and where the decision about who stands on those famous steps involves countless variables we will never fully know. There is a fascinating tension at the heart of this that has been noted by several commentators, and it is worth sitting with. Lauren Sanchez is reportedly pushing against some of Wintour's famous control over the event, specifically regarding the dress code. While Wintour is known for strictly overseeing what guests wear, sources have suggested that Lauren Sanchez has made clear she will attend looking like herself, bold, confident, unfiltered, and not adjust to anyone's preferences. One Hollywood source described this dynamic by saying, "Lauren bought this ball." She has, in other words, arrived in Anna Wintour's domain with enough financial leverage to operate by different rules. And yet, the guest list still carries Wintour's fingerprints. Meghan still did not receive an invitation. These two things can be true simultaneously. And this is where the story takes an unexpected turn. Because while all of this social and political maneuvering has been unfolding around the Met Gala, Meghan's professional landscape has been shifting simultaneously, and not always in the direction she would have hoped. In March of this year, Netflix announced that it was withdrawing its investment in As Ever, Meghan's lifestyle brand. The streaming giant was careful in its language. A spokesperson said Netflix was never planning to be a long-term backer of the lifestyle company, that the intention was always to support its launch and then allow it to stand independently. As Ever released its own statement, describing the move as a natural progression and expressing excitement about the year ahead. But the context tells a more complicated story. With Love, Meghan, the lifestyle series that had been intended to anchor the brand on Netflix, saw its viewership decline significantly in its second season in late 2025. Reports emerged suggesting a third season would not happen. Netflix simultaneously downgraded the Sussex's broader production deal from a full partnership arrangement to a first-look contract, which represents a meaningful reduction in the financial and creative commitment. Sources speaking to Variety painted a picture of a relationship that had run into genuine difficulties. A-list talent had been reluctant to work with the couple, creative projects had stalled. The perception, among those in Hollywood's production community, was that Harry and Meghan had become, as one source put it, exhausting, that the story of their royal exit, which had once felt revelatory and urgent, had now been told so many times and in so many forms that there was simply nothing left in it for audiences or for the industry professionals who might once have wanted to collaborate. Netflix disputes the most damaging versions of these characterizations. Meghan's legal team has pushed back firmly against specific claims. But the observable facts, the reduced deal, the withdrawn investment, and the declining viewership are not matters of opinion. They happened. And the podcast that was meant to demonstrate Meghan's access to the world's most influential women, Confessions of a Female Founder, has reportedly struggled to attract the caliber of guest she had hoped for. Sources have suggested that she reached out to Beyoncé and to Taylor Swift, neither of whom agreed to appear. The guests who did appear were described in some quarters as a disappointment for a project with her ambitions. She lives in California, one particularly pointed insider quote noted, and the best she can get is a woman who runs a dating app. That is a cruel thing to say. It is the kind of cruelty that circulates in Hollywood when someone's star is perceived to be dimming. And whether or not it is fair, it tells us something important about the atmosphere in which Meghan is currently operating. Take a moment to think about what it actually feels like to be in that position. Not what we think of Meghan, not our verdict on whether she deserves sympathy or not, just What it actually feels like, as a human being, to have moved your life from one continent to another, to have walked away from one of the most structurally secure existences on Earth, to have bet everything on your own ability to build something new, and then to watch, one by one, as the doors you believed were opening begin to close again. The Bezos wedding you were not invited to, the Met Gala steps you are not standing on, the podcast that the biggest names in entertainment have not returned calls about, the Netflix deal that has been scaled back, the lifestyle brand that is now navigating without its most powerful financial backer. We do not have to agree with every choice she has made to understand that the human experience at the center of this story is one of genuine difficulty. That is not a pass. It is not an excuse for behaviors that, if the reporting is accurate, have contributed to the situation she finds herself in. It is simply an acknowledgement that there is a real person inside all of this noise, and that real person is having a genuinely hard time. Harry, too, it should be said. Sources who have spoken about the couple's broader situation describe a man who has found the transition from royal life to civilian celebrity life harder than he perhaps expected. One commentator put it plainly: the shift from royal duties to celebrity lifestyle has hit a dead end. Harry was raised within the structure of the monarchy. He understood instinctively how that world worked, what was expected of him, what role he was to play. The world he now inhabits does not come with an instruction manual, and he is, by some accounts, less naturally equipped for its particular demands than his wife is. So what does all of this tell us, and what does it leave unresolved? Let us go back to the question we opened with. The photograph in Paris, the warm embrace, the compliments about the white ensemble. What did it mean? The most honest answer is probably this: it meant something, but not everything. It meant that whatever personal animosity may have existed between Anna Wintour and Meghan Markle was, at that particular moment, set aside, that the women were capable of warmth with each other, that a door had not been permanently welded shut. But warmth is not the same as trust. A warm encounter at a fashion show does not erase years of decisions made in private about what is appropriate, what is workable, what sends the right signal about who belongs in a particular room. The fashion world, perhaps more than any other world, operates on an invisible architecture of approval and disapproval that cannot be entirely dismantled by a single viral moment. And the introduction of Lauren Sanchez as a central figure in this year's Met Gala, as not just a guest but a patron, added a complication that the Paris moment could not have anticipated. Because even if Wintour had wanted to invite Meghan, the dynamics of that invitation would now land differently. An invitation to an event co-sponsored by a woman who feels, by all reported accounts, that she was once dismissed as beneath consideration, that is not a simple social courtesy. That is a negotiation involving multiple people's feelings and histories and pride. Power in Hollywood is personal. It always has been. The social snub that feels petty in isolation is often, on closer examination, the downstream consequence of something that happened long before most people were paying attention. What happens next is genuinely unclear. There are reports that Meghan is being encouraged to consider returning to acting. A senior casting agent quoted in recent coverage described her as a unicorn, someone whose attachment to a project would bring a level of attention that very few people in the world could generate. Studios and producers are said to be actively interested. Her legal team has made clear she is in ongoing contact with Netflix leadership, and the full picture of what that relationship looks like going forward may be very different from the more dramatic reports suggest. There is also the As Ever brand itself, which, despite the Netflix withdrawal, is continuing to operate and, according to its own statements, experiencing meaningful growth. Whether that growth is sufficient to justify the ambitions originally attached to the project is something only time will tell. And the Sussexes themselves have, throughout all of the turbulence of the past year, continued to show up for causes that appear genuinely close to their hearts. The Invictus Games in Vancouver, ongoing work with veterans and mental health organizations. Whatever the state of their Hollywood relationships, their commitment to that work has not visibly wavered, and it deserves to be acknowledged. But the Met Gala steps remained empty of them on the first Monday in May. The most exclusive fashion event in the world unfolded without the Duchess of Sussex, a woman who, at various points in the last decade, seemed destined to be exactly the kind of person who belonged on those steps. A woman who guest-edited a British Vogue issue that sold out in 10 days. A woman who understands fashion, who uses it with intelligence and intention, and who was photographed just months ago receiving compliments from the most powerful gatekeeper in fashion herself. The distance between that Paris moment and the reality of the 2026 Met Gala is one of the more quietly revealing gaps in this entire story. Not dramatic, not manufactured, just real. A gap between how a relationship appeared from the outside and how it functioned when it actually came time to act on it. There is a phrase that gets used in the world of high society, and it is, I think, the most useful lens through which to understand everything we have discussed today. Being liked and being invited are not the same thing. You can be charming in a room, you can be warmly received, you can leave an encounter with someone feeling that a corner has been turned, and that someone can return to their desk, look at their list, and simply not put your name on it, not out of malice, but out of a complex calculation involving history, relationships, loyalties, and the particular kind of social arithmetic that the very powerful carry out quietly, without announcement, every single day. Meghan Markle is, by any fair assessment, a woman of considerable intelligence, genuine talent, and real personal warmth. She is also someone who has made decisions about who she aligned with, who she chose to distance herself from, how she negotiated in rooms where the unwritten rules mattered as much as the written ones, that appear to have had lasting consequences. Those two things can both be true. Usually, the most interesting human stories are the ones where both things are true. The question that has been sitting at the back of this entire conversation, the one we planted at the very beginning, is this. What does it actually mean when someone tells you that you look amazing and then does not invite you to the room? Perhaps it means that the door was never quite as it appeared. Or perhaps it means that warmth, real warmth, is possible between people who have complicated histories, but that warmth alone has never been enough to override the quiet, careful, unannounced decisions that actually determine who stands on those steps. Or perhaps the truest answer is the most human one, that relationships are not negotiations, and that treating them as such, however understandable the reasons, however strategically sensible the impulse, eventually produces exactly this: a warm exchange in Paris, a viral video, and an envelope that never arrives. Whatever you believe about Meghan, about Harry, about the choices they have made and the world they are navigating, this particular story is worth sitting with, because it is not really about fashion. It is about the gap between how we present ourselves to the world and how the world actually receives us. And that is a story none of us is entirely outside of. If this kind of honest, unhurried storytelling is something you value, we would love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. What do you make of all of this? Was this simply the consequence of decisions made over many years? Or is there something in this story that you think the commentary has consistently missed? We read every comment, and some of the most interesting conversations we have had on this channel have begun exactly there. Thank you, as always, for watching and for thinking.